If you are listening to this podcast, it means you're searching for someone who understands you, someone who gets you. You are yearning to be understood and to belong. Welcome to the Someone Gets Me podcast, where we help smart, talented, and sensitive people navigate an often insensitive world. I am Dianne A, your host. My roles as ambassador, author, speaker, and intuitive mentor for bright and talented people are woven into each episode. I have the experience and knowledge to educate and inspire, as I have been there and I understand your unique intensities, sensitivities, and challenges. Welcome. Care for the Neurodivergent Soul. This is part 2. Hi friends, it's Dianne here, sipping on some black tea with black currant flavoring in it. And I mention that because that's part of care for a neurodivergent soul, is to experience things that I would call yummy. Like it's a little chilly outside, so I have my tea and I'm comfortable and I'm sitting in a yummy chair and I have on yummy, comfortable clothes with no tags bothering me. All of these things that matter when it comes to caring for our unique souls. So I want to review a little bit of what I covered last week to catch you up. If you have not listened to last week's show, Care for the Neurodivergent Soul Part 1, you probably want to listen to that one too, because that one I talk about some of the kind of facts, right? In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about experience. So they go together. One's more wiring and facts, and the other one's a little bit more experiences. And so the link for last week's show will be in the show notes of this show, or you can just go back 1 week. So let's do a little bit of recap. Some of the things that matter to me when it comes to a neurodivergent soul, whether it's my own or other people I know, whether they know they're neurodivergent or not. See, there's a lot of people out there that have ADHD or the flavor of ADHD, or they have other things that would classify them as neurodivergent, and they may not know it. They may be thinking, well, this is just how I am. You know, I've had some clients in the past that hid their variances and their differences because they were told by elder relatives like aunts and uncles that those differences meant that they were possessed by demons and to not talk about them, which of course is not true. So I've had to do a lot of work with people over the years to unlearn the prejudices and comments of others that simply are not true. So we are wired differently, right? We talked about this. We are wired differently, and there's things that matter to somebody with neurodivergence in their wiring that often people who don't have it don't have the same level of importance on these things. Not that they don't see it as important, but it's a qualitative difference. Neurodivergent people aren't typically motivated by money, that only anyway. And what really matters is, are we interested in it, and is it new? Which is why a lot of children, and a lot of adults for that matter, we get started on something and we start learning something new because it's novel and it's different and it's fun and we're interested, and we dive very deeply in so that we can fully experience whatever it is, whether it's playing pickleball or going sailing or a craft or food, or like me and my yummy tea. There are things like I have to have the right cup that has the right weight, that has the right shape for my hands. There's much more to it than just slurping up tea. And so we also have to have challenge and have passion in what we do. I love my work. I love everything about my work. I would do my work if I wasn't paid for it. Now, it's convenient that people see great value in my work and I get paid for it, because then I can actually pay to continue my work. For the people that work with me, and I have a roof over my head and food, and it's a great exchange. That's all money is anyway, is it's a form of exchange. But what matters is there's value in it and I have passion for it. And then, of course, there's urgency. We, people who are neurodivergent, we like to have urgency. And even if we don't like urgency a lot, we thrive in it because when there is a deadline or something we need to do quickly, we will often rise to the occasion. So, in all of this, one of the situations with us is that consequences don't necessarily hold a whole lot of weight because what matters is our passion and our curiosity and our interest. And sometimes we put consequences on the back burner because we'll deal with them, which isn't all bad all the time. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is be aware of it. So if somebody tries to tell your child or you, this is going to be the consequence, and the person kind of ignores that and still goes after what's important, they might have some neurodivergence there where the consequence that's being told to them may or may not actually carry any weight in that person's worldview. So what we want to do to care for our soul, for our inner sanctuary, is to really develop a connection between our brain and our heart and our soul, that inner sanctuary. All parts of us, we want to imagine them being aligned. So if you were sitting up straight or standing up straight, you would have your mind or your brain, the way you think, your processing, your prefrontal cortex, all of the bright ideas you have, and the way you can think and solve things. Then we also have the heart center, which is where our emotions lie, our connections to things. Like people who go to watch sunsets or sunrises, they don't go to see the sunset or rise. They go because of the feeling they have while witnessing that. It's the feeling that drives our behavior. And then, of course, we want to pay attention to our soul, which some people would call our gut or that inner essence, that part of us that is that safe place. I call it a sanctuary, and that helps keep everybody going. So everything goes together. And so if you're highly intuitive or you're very empathic, and that's part of your neurodivergence, you will notice that you feel things in your gut, that your sacred, safe space gives you messages, not always in English words, but feelings. You know things before others, or you can feel into a situation, or feel what somebody else is feeling, or what's happening in a room before others even say a word. And so having connection to that soul, that deep part of us, is vital when it comes to taking care of ourselves. Now, there are some ways to do this, to bring all three into alignment. We want our mind, our thinking self, our heart, our feeling self, and our soul, which is our connection self, to all be lined up as much as possible. So when you live from your head only and you think and process all the time, and you're not really connected to your heart or your soul, it's like trying to sit on a three-legged stool, but with only one leg there. It gets a little wonky. Same thing if you try to use just your intuition or your empathy skills. I've had other people who are intuitive say, well, you're thinking too much. Just use your empathy. Well, no, not necessarily. Some of us are built to have a more balance of our brain supporting our heart, supporting our soul. But we want our soul to lead and let our heart and our brain do the three-dimensional everyday how-tos. So what I do in the morning as caring for my soul is when I wake up, the first thing I do is I say, thank you, thank you, thank you to all parts of me. My higher self, the higher universe, my heart, my brain, my mind, all of me gets thank yous. And then I ask kind of out loud and sometimes only in my head, what is mine to do today? Like, what is mine to do? Asking that inner knowingness that I have in that sanctuary, what is mine to do? And oftentimes it will be things like smile or spread love or share your gift or be compassionate to yourself. There's all kinds of messages that come through. And it matters that I listen to that and I follow it. That doesn't mean that's all I do, certainly. And it doesn't mean that's all you should do. It means that's a great way to start the day by caring for all of who we are in alignment. It matters because then as we walk through the day and we have experiences and interactions and we do things, we can do them with better authenticity. We can feel more deeply and we can be more satisfied and successful in our endeavors, whatever they are. Because, see, we want to fulfill our senses. How we smell, the colors of things, what we see, our sound. Like there's some sounds that really get me going. The nails on chalkboard thing is one sound that gets a lot of people going, but I have some others that they're not pleasant. But then I have other sounds that just drop me into this beautiful meditative state. And same thing with touch. Sometimes I rub my hands together when I'm talking and they feel a bit dry. And that's not as soothing and beautiful as when I've just put some kind of moisturizer on my body and my skin feels differently. Same thing with smells. I have a friend of mine who used to take care of my other dog, and her home has a cool smell in it. And every time my dog would come home from staying with her, she would smell that smell. I don't even really know what it is. I just call it the Camp Lisa smell because that's how she always smelled, and it was beautiful. But I noticed it. And then there's color, right? Like some people love white lights and some people like colored lights, and then there's bright white lights and there's warm white lights and there's all different things. And how about all the different colors of fabric? When does teal become blue, and then when does teal become green? There's so many different ways to think about these things. And care for our soul reminds us that we slow down for a minute. We step out of the hustle and bustle of the world. We take a few breaths and we pay attention. What am I smelling? What am I feeling? What colors am I taking in? What sounds are happening? How is my touch going? What are the clothes I might be wearing? How do they touch my skin? What about the air and how it touches our skin, or water, whatever? Paying attention to all those things. Because we use our senses often to soothe ourselves. So when we're living in this kind of chaotic, turbulent world sometimes, and maybe we're exposed to things that kind of can make us anxious or fearful, or we have difficulty grounding, we want to learn ways to self-soothe, to ground ourselves. Well, we can do it with stuff like weighted blankets, or humming is really good. For weighted blankets, I like to have a blanket. It's not technically a weighted blanket, but it's a blanket on my bed that has enough weight on it that when I put it over me, I feel safe. Now, I don't feel unsafe when I don't have it, but I feel safer when I do have it. My system can relax on a different level. And then we also can do a lot of deep breathing. And I'm sure you've heard of box breathing or all different kinds of breath that help us relax, right? Well, deep breaths, when you really take a deep breath, your diaphragm massages your vagus nerve, which helps calm your system down. It helps regulate you. It helps your nervous system come into harmony with your emotions and your mind and your soul. So often, simply breathing and paying attention to moving your diaphragm can completely change the way you're experiencing the world in that moment. Because a lot of people were taught when you take a deep breath to suck your belly in because you want to look thin, when really if you're breathing properly, when you take a deep breath, your belly goes out. There's those situations, right? But also sometimes when people are holding a lot of fear or a lot of unresolved grief, knowingly or unknowingly, to them, it may not even be conscious of it yet. They're holding their breath a lot. In part of the work that I do, a lot of the times I'm always pointing out people breathing. Like, are you breathing? I remember one time I was facilitating a group for a team of executives, and they were the board and the managing partners of a fairly large organization. And I was facilitating this meeting with them about how to thrive in chaos. Like, how do you come out of chaos and uncertain and unpredictable times with a focus and your head about you? And how do you lead yourself personally, your family, and the company that we were talking about? How do we have things move forward even when things are chaotic and uncertain? And it's very important to remember that we have to breathe. And I remember I was presenting a slide, and the gentleman just to the right of me was sitting there, and he was listening. And then there are a few other, everybody was listening, but I could feel his energy, and he wasn't breathing. Like, he was holding his breath half the time. And I remember that very intuitively and spontaneously, I looked at him and said, "Will you please breathe?" And it made everyone laugh. And so then everybody, because they were laughing, was now breathing. And I had a great teaching moment to teach these executives, these people running big companies and working together to transcend a very turbulent time in our world. And how are they going to bring their company forward, but also how are they going to bring themselves personally forward and their families. And if we're not breathing, we're not connected to any of the vital parts of us that will help us in that endeavor. So when you're talking, whether you're talking personal development or professional development or just knowledge expansion or life in general, whether you're a leader or not, breathing is vital to your survival and your success. Not just gasping for air or breathing out of the top of your chest like many people do, but real breathing. So another thing that matters is to allow your creative self to show up. Our creative self is the part of us that plays, that can act childlike and have a level of innocence. It's that part of us that can transcend whatever the current message or theory might be or dynamic might be. And that is very important. I work with a lot of neuroscientists, and they need to be very creative because they're researching things that nobody has thought about yet that we know of, right? They're stepping beyond what's known to research things so that then whatever they're researching can become known. And so in order to do that, they need to use their intuition, their gut, their soul. They need to use their heart to say, how does it feel? What's happening here and what information they're getting? How does it feel? And they also need to use their intelligence to run the experiment, to write the grants, to take care of things that their prefrontal cortex and their intelligence has to do. So something like research or something like running a big company or something like being an entrepreneur where you have lots of things in the fire require, if you're going to be successful and happy, all those parts working together. It's not just brain and heart, it's brain and heart and your inner sacred space. For me, it's my sanctuary is what I call it. Your soul, whatever, that animating force of you needs to be in alignment with your mind and your heart. Otherwise, things get a little weird. And the last thing I really want to talk about when it comes to really caring for you, and I think it's one of the most important ones, and that is setting boundaries. Setting boundaries with others and with yourself. Now, that doesn't mean electrifying fences or being really angry or all of those things. It doesn't mean that at all. But what it does mean is being really clear. So you have the boundaries of how you let people into your world, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. What's the criteria? In fact, I ask people, what's your criteria of letting someone into your world? And half the people I know can't answer that until we talk about it. And they're not paying attention to those boundaries. But the other boundaries I think that are equally or more important are your inner boundaries. And the inner boundaries speak to how much of you is showing up in any certain situation. So when I'm in a board meeting, or I'm facilitating a meeting, or I'm speaking to one of my executive clients, or I'm speaking to one of my college students I work with, I come with all of me. When I'm at the grocery store, I bring about 5% of me. So how much of you shows up in different situations? If you have to deal with a situation that maybe has some old hurts or some fears involved, you might want to bring a little less of you at first. Because one of the things I see that neurodivergent people do is they give too much too quickly and overextend, which can create compassion fatigue, decision fatigue, and just downright being burned out. So we would best be served by paying attention to how much of you shows up in a certain situation. Now, see, the cool thing is you can always change it in the middle of the situation. You can say, well, I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm only going to bring, 20% of me, but then find out it's really safe and fun. And now you're bringing more of you. Totally fine. But what are you doing? And by paying attention to your inner boundaries and your external boundaries, you create safety. And the most important safety to have if you want to be successful in things is psychological safety. You want to offer that to others. You want to be psychologically safe with others, meaning another person can share what they think or feel about without fear of retribution or you getting very angry with them or hurting them somehow. And they want to do the same thing for them, right? So everybody works on psychological safety because people don't share what's really going on. Now, remember, we're motivated by passion and novelty and curiosity and interest. So if I share with you something that's really important to me that interests me and you shut me down or say something mean, that takes away that sense of safety and it crosses that boundary and makes it so that I have to work through how am I going to share something the next time. Just like if you overshare your things more than maybe is helpful, you can end up putting yourself in a psychologically kind of dicey situation. Yeah. Does that make sense? I think it does, right? And so when we slow down our fast-paced inner life just a bit, and we allow ourselves to let our wiring, our inner self, help pace things for us, and we pay attention to our experiences, to what our soul is saying, to how we're feeling, we begin to realize that as a neurodivergent person, self-compassion and self-awareness are vital to our happiness and our health. Paying attention to who we are, what we're about, and how we're engaging with the world. And sometimes that self-compassion might be a little tricky because you might be hard on yourself. Or sometimes setting boundaries might be difficult because you might have to set them with somebody you never set them with in the same way you are, right? This is why it's always helpful to have like an inner circle of people who understand you, who understand your neurodivergent, twice exceptional self, and can listen to you with an open heart and an open mind as you work through and process how much of you is going to show up and in what ways. How are you going to connect yourself with nature and with others? How are you going to allow quiet to serve your highest good? There's so many factors. But I think what's really critical is that we realize that as a neurodivergent person, we are wired differently than the norm. So trying to be like the norm causes great division within us and difficulty. So embrace your neurodivergent self. Embrace the parts of you that are different. Use them for your benefit rather than making excuses. Allow yourself to connect to that inner sanctuary you've got going on. Feel into who you are in your gut and allow yourself to care for yourself. The message that we get in this culture is care for everybody else before us. But just like on the airplane, we put the oxygen mask on us in order to help others. So you have to take care of yourself first, and then you give from your overflow. It's not noble to burn yourself out. It's not noble to give when you're not giving to you. Those messages that were out in the world, and still some people say them, they're old news and they don't work. So you want to give from your overflow by being compassionate with yourself, nurturing yourself, and having, above all, healthy boundaries. So friends, if any of this rings true for you or you have any questions, you can always schedule a get to know you call with me, and you can have 30 minutes with me to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And always know that I'm here for you, supporting you, cheering you on, whether I've met you personally yet or not. So in the meantime, keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star. You are here on purpose with a purpose, and I know that to be true. So go out there and listen to your inner sanctuary, listen to your heart, listen to your mind, and let them all talk together. And from that place, you will have nurtured your soul. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Dianne telling you to be well. Are you tired of searching for someone to understand you? Join our Facebook group, Someone Gets Me. In this group, you will be able to connect with others who are intense, sensitive, smart, and talented. I share my insights and teachings, and you can connect with others in a real, authentic, safe forum. So join us today. Someone Gets Me.